Now on Up North Live News at 6. New information tonight on possible cuts to the Fish and Wildlife Division, a major development in the fight against invasive species in Michigan. Could there be a possible new source of PFAS in Wexford County? What a family found out about their water in Boon Township. Plus, there may be changes in how Department of Natural Resource officers have to conduct their business. We'll break it down for you. And how high school students are getting an early look at jobs in the criminal justice system.
This is Up North Live News at 6 on 7 and 4.
Continuing our coverage on PFAS in Wexford County, a family in Boon Township is sharing they tested their water and learned they had some of the highest contamination numbers to date. Our Allie Baxter met with the family to learn more.
People living in Cadillac in the area around the industrial park are taking a closer look at getting their private wells tested for any signs of PFAS. But what if you don't live anywhere near the industrial park and you don't even live in Cadillac? What if you live 8 miles away in Boon Township?
Never thought that being out here, I thought we'd be safe. And of course we're not. So it's pretty devastating, really.
Alicia Garber and her family just moved to their new home in Boone a month ago. But a week into living here, something felt off.
My daughter started having these like little rashes in her arms, and then like right here and under her legs and her neck. And after she would sweat or take a bath, she would just start itching really bad, and they would blister. Before where we lived, we didn't have a dishwasher, so I always freehanded wash dishes. And I was washing dishes. That's another thing, is I was washing dishes. I had this big old rash on my hand.
Alicia says her family wasn't drinking the water at their old house. So the only thing that had changed in the last month was using the water at their new home.
I just started thinking, I'm like, it's the water. It has to be the water.
These are Alicia's results, showing the level of PFAS contamination is higher than allowed federal and state levels. Alicia was told it's the highest contamination numbers advocates have seen come back from testing so far.
I did not know how bad my numbers were. I didn't know anything about PFAS, really.
Now Alicia is buying tests for all her neighbors. She's also investing in a home filtration system. But in the meantime, her family is using distilled and bottled water.
So I don't really feel safe, truthfully. I'd like to see more testing done, especially out here in Boone and other areas where there's lots of farm country. I think that if we get more tests done, then we can figure out what's going on.
Alicia's message now, if you suspect it, get a test. She was encouraged to by the Cadillac Advocates for Clean Water.
For anyone who lives in Boone, Michigan, Cadillac, Michigan, or any of the surrounding areas, we are finding PFAS contamination in many different places. The most important thing is to put yourself on a testing schedule. So test right now for PFAS, and you can get a general water test as well.
In Wexford County, Allie Baxter, Up North Live News.
And Alicia told us she spoke to Boone Township officials about her discovery. She says they are also concerned by the results. A water testing company is expected to present at an upcoming township meeting.
Investigators are still trying to determine the cause of a fire at Lautner Irrigation in Traverse City this morning. This is video from the scene. Smoke bellowed out of the building on West Front Street as crews poured water on the front of the structure. You can see a large burn mark on the garage door of the building. A portion of the street was closed while crews worked to put out the fire. No word on a cause or damage estimate, and we will continue to provide any updates as information becomes available.
Well, private property implies a certain sense of privacy, but a northern Michigan lawmaker says more can be done, especially when it comes to conservation officers and private property. A bill has been proposed in Lansing that would require, in many cases, a conservation officer with the DNR, much like a traditional police officer, to get a warrant before going on private land.
It's a pleasure to be testifying before you today on my House Bill 4073 that would require DNR conservation officers to obtain a warrant before entering private property.
And with that, committee testimony began on proposed House Bill 4073, introduced by State Representative Dave Preston of the Central UP.
I think every long-term property owner, at least up in my neck of the woods, has a story at one point in time or another where they've either wandered across a conservation officer on their property, really not even doing anything related to that property owner.
And this, Representative Preston believes, would help limit that by essentially requiring the DNR's conservation officers to get a search warrant before entering private property.
This bill is not designed to unnecessarily restrict the duties of conservation officers. It is designed to find a balance. We can and should find that balance and balance the responsibilities of our conservation officers with the privacy rights of our citizens.
If passed, this legislation wouldn't require a warrant if the property owner authorized access, or if the officer is actively pursuing a suspect, or to stop the destruction of evidence. But supporters say it would create a better privacy boundary for property owners when it comes to what some describe as searches geared towards finding an offense.
Unfortunately, the Michigan DNR seems to depend on these sorts of searches to enforce state law in certain circumstances.
Most everyone can probably appreciate privacy, especially when it comes to the land they own. But not everyone agrees this is necessary for that.
I'll be very clear that our officers are not permitted to randomly enter private property without a clear reason to do so.
DNR Law Enforcement Chief Jason Haynes says it's important that COs have access to private land, following best practices and guidelines in order to do their job.
78% of the lands in the state of Michigan are under private ownership. And as written, this bill would essentially translate into little to no enforcement and protection for those resources on those private lands.
And that having to get a warrant in almost every situation beyond those excluded in the proposed legislation would dramatically delay their investigation and be an unnecessary drain on an already limited resource.
A situation that could have likely been handled in perhaps 30 minutes or less. Now we've got multiple hours wrapped up into this, and this clearly takes up a lot more time of the conservation officer that could be out handling, responding to other complaints, or conducting proactive patrols.
A second bill has been introduced that would require conservation officers to wear body cameras. As of right now, both bills sit in the House Natural Resource and Tourism Committee awaiting for a potential vote in order to advance to the House floor.
The sea lamprey control season is supposed to start in April, but its fate remains uncertain after a dozen federal workers were fired last month. Now, Congressman Jack Bergman is calling for answers from Washington. UpNorthLive's Daniel Zivian joins us live with more about the firings. Daniel.
Maya, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission says controlling invasive sea lamprey not only protects native fish, it also protects the industries and services that bring money into Michigan, as well as the surrounding states and Canada. That's why the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service handles lamprey control in our area, operating out of the Ludington and Marquette biological stations, from which the 12 workers were fired. The commission told us last month that the last time control was cut back during COVID, lamprey populations went back up by about 300%.
They execute the actual treatments in the waterways that are known to control and kill sea lamprey. And pretty simple, we can't do it without them. This is not the kind of program that happens behind a desk. It's not something that can happen from afar.
Congressman Jack Bergman says his office has received many calls on the subject and that his team is trying to get answers from the executive. His statement says he believes many seasonal employees may be brought back by the commission, but then he goes on to say, quote, I have formally reached out to both FWS and the U.S. Office of Personnel Management to get clarity on whether the released workers can be rehired or have their positions backfilled in time for the 2025 lamprey spraying season. Unfortunately, we're still awaiting a response, but please know we are pushing for answers and are actively working with GLFC to ensure this issue gets resolved as soon as possible. We reached out to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for comment. A spokesperson got back to us, said they are not commenting on personnel matters, and we also didn't hear back from the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. And of course, there's a ticking clock. As we said, the program is supposed to start in April. I'm live in Petoskey. Daniel Zivian, UpNorthLive News.
A program giving high school students hands-on experience in law enforcement career field is expanding. The Mecosta-Osceola Intermediate School District's Career Center has partnered with the Mecosta County Sheriff's Office for years. Now the district is also teaming up with the Osceola County Sheriff's Office. Program leaders say this will give students more insight on how different county jails operate. With this work-based learning program, 9 students will take turns shadowing corrections staff for 1 8-hour shift each week.
It kind of just prepared me for what to look for in a jail. Obviously, jails around our counties are a lot different than prisons in big cities. So I kind of feel like that gave me the either like I want that because I don't want more, because I feel like that'd be a lot more to handle.
That's what gives these kids the real life experience, getting into those jails and seeing what those corrections officers do, meeting the administration, meeting the sheriff. My students need to know what the sheriff's names are and things like that. You know, they need to know those things. And so it's really, really important for the pairing, for the student success, to be able to learn in the classroom and then go put what they've learned into the field.
Paquette says while Mecosta and Osceola are the only two they've partnered with for work-based learning, students also go on field trips to other sheriff's offices all around the state, such as Newaygo, Kent, and Isabella counties.
A Reed City family is partnering with the Jet Foundation to help raise money for a wheelchair-accessible van. 14-year-old Alexander Matzella and his 15-year-old brother Michael both have Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Their parents, Tabitha and Mike, say with this disease, the kids rely on wheelchairs. Both kids have manual and power wheelchairs, but their current van has more than 300,000 miles on it. The van also has broken side doors, which forces the family to lift them through the passenger door, making power wheelchairs unusable.
Where it gets really complex is especially when we have to go to the doctor or navigate those places that are a little bit more challenging for them to walk. It gets really difficult because I have to push them around and therefore they've lost independence. And versus if we had a van that they could access themselves, they could, drive themselves up on the ramp, they could get in the vehicle, they could, when we're at places, with dignity.
The Matzella family is raising $40,000 for a wheelchair-accessible van, and the Jet Foundation will match their funds. And if the goal is reached, the foundation will provide the van. If you are interested in making a donation, we have a link to the fundraiser on our website, UpNorthLive.com.
We are tracking severe weather potentially back into the forecast. We'll have sleet, freezing rain, snow, and even some thunderstorms with hail, all possible over the course of the next 24 hours. We'll talk about that in the main weather when we come back in just a few minutes.
I'm Jada Johnson from Big Boys TV, and the Fish and Game Report is sponsored by Johnson's Propane.